they'd been trying to break into for years. They stop resenting their body, and suddenly the health issue that baffled doctors begins to shift. They forgive themselves for a past mistake, and the creative block that had them stuck for months dissolves overnight. This isn't coincidence, it's cause and effect operating on a level most people never learn to recognize. Here's what I need you to understand. Your outer world is not separate from your inner world. It's not like your thoughts are happening inside your head and reality is happening outside somewhere else. Your thoughts are reality in formation. They're the blueprint. They're the architectural plans. When you change the blueprint, the building has to change too. It has no choice. But most people are trying to remodel the building without ever touching the blueprint. They're trying to paint the walls of a structure that doesn't match their design. They're attempting to force reality to conform to their desires while simultaneously broadcasting a completely different signal through their beliefs and emotions. It's like planting tomato seeds and being angry that you're not getting roses. You can yell at the ground. You can demand the universe give you roses. You can read every book about roses and attend every seminar on rose cultivation. But if you keep planting tomato seeds through your dominant vibration, you're going to keep getting tomatoes. The universe isn't punishing you. It's not testing you or withholding from you. It's simply responding precisely to what you're actually broadcasting, not what you think you're asking for. Most people are asking for abundance while broadcasting lack, requesting love while vibrating unworthiness, wanting peace while feeding the frequency of chaos. And then they wonder why their prayers go unanswered. Your prayers are always answered. Always. But the answer matches the vibration of the prayer, not the words of the prayer. This is why two people can say the exact same affirmation and get completely different results. The universe doesn't respond to what you say, it responds to what you are. I saw this illustrated so clearly in a session with a woman named Patricia. She came to me frustrated because she'd been doing positive affirmations for 6 months, abundance, prosperity, financial freedom, and nothing had changed. In fact, her financial situation had gotten worse. Under hypnosis, we discovered the pattern. Every morning, she stood in front of her mirror and declared, "I am wealthy and abundant." But while her mouth said those words, her entire energy field was screaming the opposite. She was terrified, ashamed, convinced she wasn't worthy. The words were just noise. The vibration was pure lack. Her higher self showed her something that changed everything. It showed her a moment from her childhood when her mother, stressed about bills, had told her, "Money doesn't grow on trees. We're not made of money. Stop asking for things." That 5-year-old girl had made a decision in that moment. Wanting things is bad. Having needs makes you a burden. Good people don't ask for more than they need to survive. And 40 years later, she was still operating from that vibration, no matter what affirmation she spoke. This is what I mean when I say the answer matches the vibration, not the words. You can say, "I am confident" 1,000 times, but if underneath those words there's a trembling belief that you're not enough, the universe will keep reflecting that core vibration back to you. You'll keep attracting situations that make you feel small, uncertain, inadequate, not because the universe is punishing you, but because it's matching your frequency. The prayer that gets answered isn't the one you speak, it's the one you live. I've watched people transform their entire reality, not by changing their words, but by changing their vibration. And here's what's beautiful. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to maintain some impossible state of positivity every moment. The universe isn't grading you on perfection. But you do have to be honest. You do have to be willing to look at what's actually vibrating inside you, underneath the words, underneath the performances, underneath everything you've learned to say to make yourself acceptable. What are you really feeling? What are you really believing? What frequency are you actually broadcasting? That's your prayer. That's what the universe hears. And here's what most people don't understand about frequency. It's not something you turn on during meditation and then forget about. Your frequency is running 24/7. It's broadcasting while you sleep, while you eat, while you scroll through your phone, while you sit in traffic. Every single moment, you're emitting a signal into the quantum field. Think about a radio station. It doesn't broadcast for an hour and then go silent. It's constantly transmitting. You are the same way. Your consciousness is constantly transmitting a frequency, and the universe is constantly responding to that transmission. I've had clients come to me and say, Dolores, I meditate every morning. I visualize what I want. I say my affirmations, but nothing's changing. And when we dig deeper, what do we find? They meditate for 20 minutes, broadcasting gratitude and abundance, but then they spend the next 23 hours and 40 minutes broadcasting worry, doubt, and fear. 20 minutes of high frequency cannot override 23 hours of low frequency. It's mathematics. The universe is responding to your dominant signal, not your occasional signal. This is why consistency matters more than intensity. It's not about having one powerful meditation session. It's about raising your baseline frequency. It's about who you are when nobody's watching. It's about the thoughts you think when you're washing dishes, the energy you hold when you're sitting at a red light, the frequency you emit when you're falling asleep at night. Your dominant frequency becomes your dominant reality. If your dominant frequency is lack, you experience lack. If your dominant frequency is love, you experience love. If your dominant frequency is possibility, you experience possibility. And here's the beautiful part. Once you understand this, you realize that every single moment is an opportunity to choose your frequency. You're not stuck with the frequency you woke up with. You're not bound by the frequency you had yesterday. Right now, in this very moment, you can choose differently. You can be in the middle of a challenging situation and consciously choose to shift your frequency, not by denying the situation, but by choosing how you respond to it, by choosing what meaning you give it, by choosing where you place your attention. This is spiritual mastery, not living in a cave, not having perfect circumstances, but being able to maintain your frequency regardless of external conditions. Think about water for a moment. When water is heated, it doesn't complain about the temperature. It doesn't resist the process. It simply transforms from liquid to steam, from one state to another. And in that transformation, it rises. This is what's happening to you right now. The pressure you feel, the intensity of these times, it's not punishing you. It's transforming you. You're being heated up, energetically speaking, so you can rise to a higher state of consciousness. But here's what most people don't understand. You can't transform while clinging to your old form. Water can't become steam if it refuses to let go of being liquid. And you can't ascend to higher consciousness while desperately holding on to third-dimensional thinking patterns. This is why forgiveness becomes so crucial right now. Not forgiveness as a moral obligation, but forgiveness as an energetic release. Every grudge you hold, every resentment you carry, every old wound you protect, these are anchors keeping you in lower frequencies. I remember working with a woman who had carried anger toward her father for 43 years. 43 years. That's nearly half a century of her life force being drained by this one unresolved issue. And she came to me, not even about that, she came because she couldn't seem to manifest anything positive in her life. When we went into regression, we discovered something fascinating. She had made an unconscious decision at age 7 that she would never let anyone have power over her again, never let anyone hurt her. She built walls so thick that nothing could get in, but those same walls, they trapped her. Nothing could get out either, not love, not abundance, not joy. The anger toward her father was just the surface. Underneath was fear, fear of being vulnerable, fear of being hurt again, and that fear had literally shaped her entire reality for over 4 decades. When she finally released it, not by forcing forgiveness, but by understanding the soul contract, the lesson, the gift hidden in that pain, everything shifted. Within months, her health improved. Relationships that had been strained for years suddenly healed. Opportunities appeared seemingly out of nowhere. That's the power of releasing what no longer serves you. And the beautiful thing, once you've created that space, once you've released what doesn't serve you, the universe rushes in to fill it. Not with more burdens, not with more struggle, but with aligned opportunities, with relationships that actually nourish you, with experiences that expand rather than contract your energy. I've watched this happen thousands of times. Someone releases a toxic friendship, and within weeks, they meet a soul companion who truly understands them. Someone leaves a draining job, and suddenly the career they'd always dreamed of materializes. Someone lets go of an old grudge, and their health improves dramatically. These aren't coincidences. This is universal law in action. You see, the universe is always responding to your energetic signature. When you're cluttered with old patterns, old wounds, old stories that no longer serve your highest good, you're broadcasting a frequency of stagnation. But the moment you clear that energy, the moment you make space, your frequency shifts. And the universe responds immediately. Think about it like tuning a radio. When there's static and interference, you can't receive the signal clearly. But adjust the dial just slightly, clear away the noise, and suddenly the music comes through crystal clear. You haven't changed the broadcast. The broadcast was always there. You just removed what was blocking your reception. This is why the releasing process is so crucial right now, because what's coming, what's available to those who are energetically clear, is beyond what most people can currently imagine. New opportunities, new relationships, new levels of abundance, new ways of being. But you can't grab onto the new while you're still clutching the old with both hands. I remember one woman who came to me absolutely paralyzed by indecision. Should she move? Should she start her own business? Should she end her marriage? Every question led to more questions, and she was stuck in this loop of analysis that kept her completely immobilized. When we traced it back, we found that in a past life, she'd made a major decision that had led to tragic consequences. Her soul was still carrying that fear of making the wrong choice. I worked with her to help her understand that holding on to that fear wasn't protecting her, it was imprisoning her. We went through a process of releasing that old trauma, helping her see that the circumstances were completely different now, that she had wisdom and tools she didn't have before. And here's what's fascinating. Once she released that past life fear, the decision paralysis started to dissolve. She told me later that she felt like a fog had lifted. Suddenly, she could trust her intuition again. The decisions that had felt so heavy became lighter, more natural. This is what I've seen repeatedly in my work. When we free ourselves from these old soul patterns, we don't just heal one issue. We open up entire channels of our life that were blocked. It's like removing a dam from a river. Everything starts flowing again. And sometimes the pattern isn't about fear or guilt or trauma. Sometimes it's about loyalty. I've worked with people who were unconsciously staying stuck because in another lifetime they'd made promises they couldn't keep. Their soul was still trying to honor those commitments, even though the circumstances no longer existed. I remember a woman who struggled with chronic poverty consciousness. No matter what she did, she couldn't seem to hold on to money. She'd get a windfall and then immediately something would happen, a car would break down, an unexpected bill would appear, or she'd make an impulsive purchase she didn't even want. The money would just slip through her fingers like water. When we did the session, we discovered that in a past life, she'd been part of a monastic order where she'd taken a vow of poverty. That vow had been sacred to her. It represented her devotion, her spiritual path, her identity, and even though centuries had passed, even though she was no longer a monk, that vow was still operating in her subconscious. Her soul was still trying to honor it. She was literally blocking her own abundance because on some deep level, she believed that having money would violate her spiritual integrity. Can you see how insidious these patterns can be? They're not malicious. They come from a place of honor, of wanting to keep our word, of spiritual commitment. But they're operating in the wrong context now. And here's what I want you to understand. You can honor that spiritual commitment in a new way. You can keep your word to yourself, to your soul, without carrying the weight of someone else's journey on your back. I worked with a woman who had spent 15 years caring for her mother who had dementia. 15 years of her life, pausing her career, her relationships, her own dreams, because she believed it was her spiritual duty. And when her mother finally passed, she told me something that broke my heart. She said, I thought if I loved her enough, if I sacrificed enough, she would recognize me again, just once, but she never did. That sacrifice didn't heal her mother. It didn't bring recognition. It created a wound in this woman's life that took years to heal. Because the sacrifice wasn't coming from alignment, it was coming from a belief that love required the erasure of self. When we work from that place, we're not actually serving anyone. We're perpetuating a cycle of depletion that affects everyone around us. Our children learn that love means self-abandonment. Our partners feel the weight of our resentment, even when we don't speak it. The people we're sacrificing for can feel our exhaustion, our martyrdom, and it doesn't feel like love to them either. It feels like obligation, like debt. True spiritual service flows from overflow, not from depletion. It comes from a cup that's already full, spilling naturally into the world. When you're depleted, when you're running on empty, what you're giving isn't really nourishment. It's the last drops of something that's already run dry. I want you to imagine for a moment what it would look like if you honored your spiritual commitments from a place of fullness instead of emptiness. What if keeping your word to yourself was just as sacred as keeping your word to others? What if your own well-being was part of the spiritual contract, not separate from it? Because here's what I've discovered in all my years working with souls across thousands of lifetimes. The most spiritually advanced beings aren't the ones who sacrifice everything at the altar of service. They're the ones who've learned to hold space for both their own growth and the growth of others, their own needs and the needs of the collective. They understand that these aren't competing priorities. They're complementary aspects of the same spiritual truth. Think about the people you most admire spiritually. Not the ones who burned out and disappeared. Not the ones who gave until there was nothing left. But the ones who've sustained their light over decades. The ones who are still here, still helping, still growing. What do they all have in common? They've figured out how to fill their own cup while pouring into others. They've mastered the art of sustainable spirituality. And this isn't something that happens automatically. It's a practice. It's a choice you make every single day. Some days that choice looks like saying no to a request that would deplete you, even when guilt whispers that you should say yes. Other days it looks like taking a walk in nature when your to-do list is screaming for attention. Sometimes it's as simple as pausing before you respond, checking in with your body, and asking, do I actually have the energy for this, or am I running on fumes and obligation? This is where we begin to reclaim our spiritual sovereignty, when we stop outsourcing our worth to how much we can do, how much we can give, how much we can endure. When we start recognizing that our value isn't measured by our output, but by our essence, by the quality of presence we bring to each moment. Your soul didn't come here to be a workhorse for everyone else's journey. It came here to experience its own expansion, its own joy, its own unique expression of divine energy. Yes, part of that expansion happens through service, but another part happens through rest, through play, through stillness, through the simple act of being instead of constantly doing. Think about a garden for a moment. When you plant a seed, you don't dig it up every day to check if it's growing. You don't lecture the seed about its purpose. You don't tell the sprout that it's being selfish by taking time to develop roots before it flowers. You understand intuitively that growth requires periods of invisible work, of quiet transformation beneath the surface. Your soul is no different. There are seasons in your life when the most productive thing you can do is rest, reflect, and allow the integration of all you've learned. These aren't wasted periods. They're essential phases of your spiritual development. I've had clients come to me in tears, convinced they're failing their life purpose because they're going through what they call a dark night of the soul. They've lost their direction, their motivation, their sense of meaning. And what we discover in the sessions, time and time again, is that these dark nights are actually periods of profound recalibration. The soul is literally reorganizing itself at a deeper level. It's shedding old patterns, releasing karmic debris, and preparing for a new phase of growth. But from the human perspective, it just feels like you're lost, stuck, or broken. You're not broken, you're transforming. And here's what's really beautiful. Sometimes your life purpose in a given moment is simply to transform yourself so completely that you become a living example of what's possible. You don't have to teach workshops or write books or build organizations. Your very presence, your energy, your embodiment of peace or joy or authenticity becomes the gift. I've seen this in my own life. There were years when I wasn't doing hypnosis sessions, wasn't traveling, wasn't teaching. I was simply living my life, raising my family, being present to the ordinary moments. And you know what? Those years were just as purposeful as the years of my public work. Because I was integrating, healing, growing, becoming the person who could eventually do this work with integrity.
I know so many of you are in those wilderness years right now. You've left something behind, a career, a relationship, a belief system, and you haven't yet arrived at what's next.
You're in that terrifying in-between space where nothing makes sense and you wonder if you've made a terrible mistake. Let me tell you something. That space is sacred. That void is where transformation happens. That's where the old you dissolves and the new you begins to crystallize. But you can't rush it. You can't manufacture it. You have to surrender to the timeline that your soul has set. I see people trying to skip this part. They leave one thing and immediately jump into something else, just to avoid the discomfort of not knowing. They fill the void with busyness, with new projects, with anything to avoid sitting in that uncomfortable silence. But the silence is where the answers are. The void is where you meet yourself. The wilderness is where you remember who you really are, stripped of all the roles and identities you've been wearing. When I was in my own wilderness, I didn't know I was being prepared for something. I just felt lost. I felt like I was wasting time, spinning my wheels, going nowhere. But looking back now, I can see that every moment of that confusion was necessary. Every tear, every question, every dark night of the soul was sculpting me into someone who could hold the work that was coming. You can't become a new version of yourself while clinging to the old identity. You have to let yourself come apart. You have to let the caterpillar dissolve in the cocoon before the butterfly can emerge. And that dissolving, it feels like death, because in a way it is. The death of who you thought you were, so that who you truly are can be born. So if you're in that space right now, please hear me. You're not lost, you're not behind, you're not wasting time. You're in the most important phase of your transformation. You're in the cocoon, and what's happening inside you, even though you can't see it yet, is nothing short of miraculous. Trust the wilderness, trust the void, trust the timeline. Your soul knows exactly what it's doing. And here's what most people don't realize about this void, this in-between space. It's not punishment, it's preparation. When you're in limbo, when nothing seems to be moving forward and you can't go back, your consciousness is actually being recalibrated. Your frequency is being fine-tuned. You're being prepared for a version of reality that your current mindset can't even comprehend yet. I've seen this pattern over and over in my sessions. Someone would come to me feeling completely lost, feeling like they were in purgatory. And when we'd regress them, when we'd access their higher consciousness, the same message would come through every single time. You're not stuck, you're becoming. The void is where transformation happens. The caterpillar doesn't become a butterfly while it's still crawling on leaves. It has to enter the chrysalis, that dark, enclosed, seemingly empty space, and literally dissolve. Its entire body breaks down into cellular soup before it can reorganize into something that flies. That's what's happening to you right now. You're in the chrysalis. And if you could see yourself from a higher perspective, you'd see that you're not dissolving, you're reorganizing at a fundamental level. Your relationships, your career, your sense of identity, when these things fall apart or fade away, they're not being taken from you. They're being released because they no longer match the frequency you're moving into. The universe isn't punishing you by removing these things. It's making room, and I know that doesn't make it easier. I know that when you're in it, when you're losing things and people you thought would be there forever, it feels like death. Because in a way, it's the death of who you were. It's the death of the timeline you thought you were living. But death is never the end. Death is always transition. Every ending contains within it the seed of a new beginning. That's not just poetry, that's quantum mechanics. That's the fundamental nature of energy. It transforms. It never disappears. So when you're in the void, when you're in that space where nothing makes sense and everything feels uncertain, remember this: you're not being buried, you're being planted. And the universe knows exactly what kind of soil you need, exactly how deep you need to go, and exactly how long you need to stay there before you break through into the light. I've seen this pattern play out in thousands of sessions, thousands of lives, thousands of souls who came to me feeling lost and left the session understanding that they were exactly where they needed to be. One woman I worked with, Sarah, came to me after losing everything. Her marriage ended, her business collapsed, her health deteriorated, and she told me, "Dolores, I feel like I'm dying." And in the session, her higher self said something so profound. You are dying. The old version is dying. And we're sorry, it hurts. But she had to die for you to become who you're meant to be. That's what the void does. It kills off the versions of you that can no longer serve your evolution. And I know that sounds harsh, but it's also deeply compassionate because the universe doesn't let you carry dead weight into your new reality. It strips everything away that doesn't belong in the next chapter. Everything. Your old identity, gone. Your old relationships that were based on who you pretended to be, gone. Your old coping mechanisms, gone. The stories you told yourself about who you are and what you're capable of, gone, gone, gone. The void is the great eraser. It wipes the slate clean so you can write something completely new. And here's what I learned that changed everything for me. The void doesn't just take things away. It also reveals what's been there all along, hidden underneath all the noise. When everything external falls away, the validation, the distractions, the busyness that kept you from looking too closely, what's left is the truth of who you are, your essence, your soul signature. The part of you that existed before you were born and will exist long after you leave this body. That's what the void is really doing. It's bringing you face to face with yourself, the real you. Not the you that your parents wanted you to be, not the you that society approved of, not the you that played it safe and stayed small, the you that is vast and powerful and infinite. Because here's what I discovered through thousands of sessions. The you that you think you are right now is just a tiny fraction of who you actually are. It's like looking at yourself through a keyhole and thinking that narrow slice of vision is the whole room. It's like hearing one note and thinking you've heard the entire symphony. The truth is so much bigger, so much more magnificent. You are not just this body walking around on planet Earth in the year 2024. You are consciousness itself having a temporary human experience. You are the same eternal awareness that has lived countless lives, explored countless worlds, learned countless lessons. You are both the student and the teacher, the question and the answer, the seeker and the sought. And the most beautiful part, you chose this, every single bit of it. Before you came here, before you took on this physical form, you sat in the spirit realm and planned this life with the care of an artist planning a masterpiece. You chose your parents, knowing they would give you exactly the challenges you needed to grow. You chose your struggles, knowing they would forge your strength. You chose your relationships, knowing they would mirror back the parts of yourself you needed to see. Nothing was random. Nothing was punishment. Everything was curriculum. The person who hurt you, you agreed to play that scene together before you were born. The loss that broke your heart, you knew it would crack you open to a deeper capacity for love. The failure that seemed to destroy everything, you designed it as a catalyst for your transformation. This doesn't mean the pain wasn't real. It doesn't minimize your suffering, but it does change the meaning of everything you've been through, because you weren't a victim of your life. You were the author of it. You still are. And right now, in this moment, you have the power to remember that, to step back into your true identity as the infinite being you've always been, to stop identifying with the small self that feels broken and limited, and to recognize yourself as the vast consciousness that is whole and unlimited. This is what awakening really means. Not some mystical experience reserved for monks on mountaintops. Just this, remembering who you really are, seeing through the illusion of separation, recognizing that you were never broken, never small, never powerless. You were always infinite. You were always whole. And this wholeness, this completion you've been searching for everywhere else has been residing within you all along. Not hidden, not locked away, simply waiting for your attention to turn inward. I want you to think about something for a moment. All those years you spent looking outside yourself for validation, for love, for proof that you matter. What if that very seeking was the only thing keeping you from experiencing what you already possessed? It's like standing in a room filled with light, eyes closed, convinced you're in darkness. The light doesn't need to arrive. You don't need to earn it or achieve it. You simply need to open your eyes. The beings I've worked with over decades of sessions have shown me this truth repeatedly. They speak of human consciousness like a radio that's forgotten. It can tune to different frequencies. You've been stuck on one station, the station of fear, limitation, survival, playing the same loops over and over. But you are not the station. You are the radio itself. You contain all frequencies, all possibilities. Right now, in this very moment, you have access to wisdom that transcends your personal history. You have access to love that doesn't depend on anyone loving you back. You have access to peace that exists regardless of external circumstances. This isn't wishful thinking. This isn't spiritual bypassing. This is the fundamental nature of consciousness itself. When you quiet the noise, the constant mental chatter, the endless planning and worrying, the rehearsing of past conversations and future scenarios, what remains is not emptiness. What remains is everything. Presence, awareness, the eternal witness that has been watching your entire life unfold. The part of you that was there when you were 5 years old, that's here now, that will be there in your final moments. Unchanging, unshakable, infinite. This is who you really are. Not the collection of thoughts and memories and stories you tell yourself. Not the roles you play or the masks you wear. Not even the personality you've carefully constructed over years of social conditioning. You are the consciousness experiencing all of that. You are the space in which all of it appears. And once you truly grasp this, not intellectually, but experientially, everything changes. Because when you realize you are the space, you stop trying to control what moves through that space. You stop clinging. You stop resisting. You allow the thoughts to come and go like clouds. You allow the emotions to rise and fall like waves. You allow the sensations to pulse through you like electricity, knowing that none of it defines you, none of it limits you, none of it is truly times you, asterisk. This is where real freedom begins, not in the destination, not in the achievement, not in finally getting everything to line up perfectly, but in recognizing that you were never trapped in the first place. You were always the sky. The storms just made you forget. And here's what happens when you start living from this awareness. Life becomes lighter, not because your circumstances change overnight, though sometimes they do, but because your relationship to your circumstances transforms completely. The job you thought defined your worth becomes just something you do, not who you are. The relationship you thought completed you becomes a beautiful dance, not a desperate need. The opinions that once controlled your behavior become background noise, barely worth noticing. You start making decisions from a place of clarity instead of fear. You start speaking your truth without needing everyone to agree. You start taking action not because you're running from something, but because you're genuinely drawn toward it. And people notice. They can't always put their finger on it, but they sense something different about you. There's a groundedness, a presence, a quiet confidence that doesn't need to announce itself. That's what happens when you stop identifying with the waves and remember you're the ocean. Now, I want to address something important. Some of you might be thinking, this all sounds beautiful, but what about my problems? What about my actual life? I have bills to pay. relationships to navigate, real challenges to face. And you're absolutely right. This understanding doesn't make your practical life disappear. But here's what it does do. It gives you access to a well of inner resourcefulness that was always there, but you couldn't tap into because you were too busy being the storm instead of the sky. When you're the storm, you're tossed around by every gust of emotion, every changing circumstance. When you're the sky, you can observe the storm, learn from it, and respond rather than just react. This is where practical transformation happens. Not in some mystical realm, but in your daily interactions, in how you speak to your children when you're exhausted, in how you handle criticism at work, in how you treat yourself when you make a mistake. I've watched thousands of people move through this shift, and what they discover is that the problems don't necessarily go away, but their relationship to those problems fundamentally changes. The person who was paralyzed by anxiety about money finds they can think more clearly about financial solutions when they're not identified as someone who's bad with money. The individual trapped in cycles of relationship drama discovers healthier patterns emerge when they stop defining themselves by their wounds. Because here's the thing, when you're lost in the illusion of separation, you're constantly operating from a place of lack. Not enough money, not enough love, not enough time, not enough worth. The ego thrives on this sense of deficiency. It's always comparing, always measuring, always finding you somehow insufficient. But when you recognize that your true nature is already whole, already complete, the desperate grasping begins to relax. Not because you've given up on having things or experiencing joy, but because you're no longer trying to fill a void that was only ever an illusion. You still pursue goals, but you're not attached to them as life or death propositions for your identity. You still desire connection, but you're not demanding that others complete you. You still face challenges, but you're not collapsing into them as proof of your unworthiness. This is the practical magic of understanding who you really are. It doesn't transcend your humanity, it fulfills it. It allows you to be fully human without being imprisoned by the narrow stories you've told about what that means. And perhaps most beautifully, it allows you to extend that same recognition to everyone else. When you truly understand that you're not the limited self you thought you were, you start seeing that nobody else is either. You stop needing people to be the characters in your story and start seeing them as consciousness playing its own unique game of limitation and discovery. The person who cut you off in traffic isn't a villain in your narrative. Their infinite awareness having a stressful morning, completely lost in thought, playing out their own patterns of survival and urgency. The family member who pushes your buttons isn't trying to hurt you. Their consciousness trapped in old loops of fear and protection, doing the best they can from within their particular dream. This doesn't mean you tolerate harmful behavior. It means you respond from understanding rather than from the triggered reactions of a defended separate self. You set boundaries not from judgment but from clarity. You say no when needed, not because someone is bad, but because certain interactions don't serve the well-being of either of you. And here's what becomes truly extraordinary. When you stop meeting the world as a separate self, defending its territory, the world stops reflecting that defensiveness back to you. Not because you're manifesting or attracting different circumstances, but because you're no longer interpreting everything through the filter of threat and validation. The same events that would have devastated the identified self barely register as problems. The same criticisms that would have sent you spiraling into self-doubt are simply recognized as someone else's thoughts, no more substantial than clouds passing through the sky of awareness. You begin to live with what I can only describe as functional freedom. You still have preferences. You still make choices. You still feel the full spectrum of human emotion, but none of it owns you anymore. You're the space in which all of it happens, not the character to whom it's happening. And that's when you start to notice something extraordinary about the people around you. You see someone snapping at a cashier, and instead of judgment, you feel tenderness because you recognize the script they're running. You've run that same program 1,000 times yourself. You watch someone performing on social media, crafting their highlight reel, and instead of envy or contempt, you just see the child inside them desperately asking, "Am I enough yet? Do you see me? Am I lovable like this?" You witness political arguments, religious debates, family feuds, and you see it all for what it really is. Wounded people trying to defend the identity structures that make them feel safe. Scared beings clinging to the stories that promise them significance in a universe that feels indifferent. And here's what nobody tells you about this shift. It doesn't make you detached or cold. It makes you more tender than you've ever been. Because when you're not defending your own identity anymore, you have infinite room for everyone else's. When you're not trying to prove your worth, you stop needing others to prove theirs. When you're not clinging to being right, you can finally afford to let everyone else be exactly where they are. This is the consciousness shift that changes everything. You become what some traditions call a bodhisattva, what others call an elder. What your soul actually came here to be, a space of unconditional presence in a world of conditional love. You stop trying to fix people, not because you don't care, but because you finally understand that everyone is exactly where they need to be for their own awakening. Your job isn't to drag them forward. It's to be living proof that there's another way. You become the person who can sit with someone in their pain without trying to solve it, who can witness someone's anger without absorbing it, who can love someone without needing them to change. This is the gift on the other side of ego death, not transcendence, not escape, but a kind of homecoming to what you've always been underneath all the costumes you've worn. You see, when I work with my clients in those deep trance states, something remarkable would happen in those final moments before they emerged back to waking consciousness. They would often pause, suspended between worlds, and whisper something like, "I don't want to forget this. Please don't let me forget." And I would reassure them, "You won't forget. This knowing is now part of your cellular memory. It's written into your energy field." But here's what I learned over all those years, working with thousands of souls. The forgetting isn't something that happens to you. It's something you do. It's an active choice made moment by moment to slip back into the comfortable amnesia of ordinary life. Because remembering is demanding. It asks something of you. It asks you to live from that higher awareness, even when you're stuck in traffic, even when your bank account is low, even when someone cuts you off in line at the grocery store. The real spiritual practice isn't achieving some mystical experience once. It's choosing to remember who you really are 10,000 times a day. Every time fear whispers that you're small and separate, you choose again. Every time anger wants to convince you that someone else is your enemy, you choose again. This is the work. Not glamorous, not always comfortable, but absolutely transformative. And here's something else I need you to understand. You don't have to be perfect at this. You're not supposed to walk around in some constant state of blissed out enlightenment. That's not why you came here. You came here to be human, gloriously, messily, beautifully human. You came here to feel it, all the joy and the heartbreak, the triumph and the failure, the connection and the loneliness. You came here to experience contrast because that's how consciousness knows itself. But you can be fully human while also holding the awareness of your divine nature. You can cry real tears while knowing that the part of you that witnesses those tears is eternal. You can struggle with real challenges while trusting that your higher self orchestrated these very challenges for your expansion. It's not about transcending your humanity. It's about bringing divinity into your humanity.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم: من بنى لله